Boris Johnson is here. He is, among other things, the mayor of London. Previous jobs include, get this, editor of The Spectator and Conservative member of Parliament for Henley. As leader of what he proudly calls the most significant city of the last 500 years, he is preparing hard for this summer when the world comes to London for the Olympic Games. In his spare time, he also writes. His latest book is called Johnson's Life of London, The People Who Made the City that Made the World. It is filled with the humor and erudition that we have come to expect of this mayor. Boris Johnson usually has something to say, and usually an interesting way of saying it. I am pleased to have him at this table for the first time. Let's just take a look at this bus here. These are some of the people.
Those are some of the people.
All right, now tell me who we should know about here from this bus.
Well, you've got a brilliant array of constellation of talent. I picked all these people because they came up with something.
William Shakespeare there in the driver's seat, by the way.
He's there in the driver's seat. Okay. You've got Charles Yerkes there sitting next to him, who's an American,
right?
And a great robber baron, inventor of the tube network. You've got up there in the popping out.
And so, what do they have in common?
They've got in common that they were brilliant characters who came up with something, whether it was the idea of nursing or a pioneer of Elizabethan drama or passing the blues music back to America as Keith Richards did, or whatever it happens to be. They came up with something that, or Dr. Johnson, who wrote the first dictionary of the English language. They came up with something that was of importance culturally or historically for what I think is a programmatic city. London, whether you like it or not. New York is a great transatlantic mirror of London.
Oh, come on, we'll get to that.
London, and I'm proud to be a New Yorker by birth.
That's true. That's a very interesting thing. You were born here.
I was born
here. How did that happen?
I wanted to be close to my mother. I wanted to be close to my
you were.
Yes, exactly. The details that I think will be familiar to most people. But I wanted to be close to my mother at the time, obviously, and she was here in New York because my parents were students then. Yeah. And my father was at Columbia University. So I was born in New York.
So you're an American, too?
I am an American. And
you have an American passport?
I have an American passport. Indeed, I having been once the possessor of an American passport, I discovered that in order to travel to America, I must use an American passport. So America is very, very, quite rightly, very jealous of her children.
But can't we argue that, like the empire, London was the proud city and the king of the empire? Now, America, and America's great city is New York, and New York now, much more than London, houses the largest and furthest and deepest extension of culture and fashion and film and finance.
New York and London are very similar. In population terms, London's about 7.8 million. It's the only city in Europe that's really growing. New York's a little bit bigger. But in ethnic composition, they're almost identical. In size of the financial services industry, which you mentioned, actually, London has more people employed in finance and banking and insurance. I think there's a very good case for saying that London is going to intensify, and already is the financial capital of the world, and will entrench that lead. I'll tell you why. Because if you're a banker, if you're based in Shanghai and you want to do a deal in Manaus or you want to do a deal in Rio or wherever on the same day, you're going to need an office in London.
Right.
And London is the world capital of the BRICS.
But the
big growth economies of the 21st century, you're seeing those firms listing in London, you're seeing their companies listing in London, you're seeing them locate their
but
offices
the decisions
in London.
Are made here in New York and they're just carried out in London.
And, well, no, I humbly beg to disagree with that. And if you look at some of the investments that have been made over the last, just in my time as mayor, by some of the big American finance houses, you can see the huge importance they attach to London.
Sometimes you wish it wasn't so.
And sometimes I think that I think both cities have a remarkable similarity in trajectory over the last 100 years. Don't forget, New York in the 60s and 70s went through a tough time, and 80s went through a tough time. There wasn't enough investment. Crime became a problem. Transportation became a problem. And that was certainly true of London. Actually, you saw population flight from London in the middle of the last century. And the population of London was about 9 million in 1911, and about the same number before the Second World War. The war was a disaster. Huge numbers of people moved out of the city. By 1980, I think the population was down to 6.8 million, and then it's boomed again. And it's boomed like, this is the point, like New York, partly thanks to financial services, deregulation, becoming a great entrepôt city, a global city.
So you're saying a powerful financial sector and deregulation are the key to the growth of a great city?
I certainly think that you shouldn't try to solve the present crisis by imagining regulation of the finance sector is the only answer. If you look at what's going on in the world now, and you look at the problems we've got with the global economy, which is affecting America, affecting us here in New York just as much as it's affecting Europe, the problem is not, I think, the banking system. The problem is a lack of confidence, and which is engendered by the whole Eurozone disaster. That's what they've got to solve.
So what do you think is going to happen there in terms of the Eurozone disaster?
We've got ourselves into a crazy situation in which we are exhorting the Germans and the other European Eurozone economies to go full tilt ahead towards a political construction of a fiscal union with absolutely no democratic counterweight, no accountability to the people of London, people of Europe. It is going to be, I think, a potential disaster in order to solve the problem of the sovereign debt crisis in some of these Eurozone countries.
Like Greece, Spain, and Italy.
Like Greece, Spain, Italy is not yet as bad as Spain and Greece. And you've got to wonder whether that is really the right answer, because Europe is very different from America. It is not easy to create a political union on that continent, and I think we are really compounding the mistake. That's what we're doing. We're intensifying the political problem of the euro rather than solving it.
50 years from now, will we all be debating, is Beijing the biggest and greatest city in the world? 50 years from now, will that be the question?
I think there's every prospect that places like London and New York will have just as flourishing a future as Beijing or Shanghai,
New Delhi,
Mumbai, New Delhi. Absolutely, because we have, as I say, young populations, diverse populations. These are world cities, and they're very different. I mean, if you go to Beijing, it is a completely different atmosphere. Beijing is essentially a monocultural place. London, New York, these are the cities of the future. These are the cities that bring people together, and that offer the greatest prospect, the most exciting places to live. They're the magnets for talent. Where do brilliant young people want to go to? They don't want
to the city.
They want to go to the city, but they want to go to cities where they can be themselves. And that's, by the way, to drag the subject relentlessly back to this book. That's the thing that we discovered, because so many of these characters, weren't born anywhere near London, and they came to London because it is a magnet for talent. And what you have in a place like London, and indeed New York, is the opportunity to make your name.
A meritocracy.
A meritocracy. You say it's a kind of like a nuclear reactor, a cyclotron of talent. Yeah. And people, if you have enough uranium rods, you get an explosion of genius.
Give me what the best thing you can say, because I'm interested in the subject, the future of cities and the questions for cities and the challenge for cities.
I think the city is the greatest invention of the human race, you could argue. I mean, it's an amazing... Because it is the way to... for people to live that is most eco-friendly.
Yep.
You have a lower carbon footprint in the city than you do in the countryside. You live longer. You have better healthcare. You have better educational outcomes. You have higher per capita GDP than if you live...
Better educational facilities?
And better educational facilities than if you live in the country. So that's why people are moving to the city. And by 2050, a huge population, a huge proportion of the world will live in cities.
Richard Florida and other people have written about this, as you well know. I mean,
so the answer is, and the guy I think you should really, is a guy called Edmund Glaser.
Right.
Do you know how guy?
Yes,
I mean,
yes.
A brilliant book called The Triumph of the City, and the key thing is to make sure that these places are pleasant to live in, and that you deal with problems of.
So the urban dilemma
transit,
is to make sure that cities with all the good things happen to them that are happening to them, and what they represent in terms of the center of culture and finance and all that.
You've got to fight crime.
You got to make sure.
You've got to keep crime coming down. You've got to invest in the transport system so that people can move around freely, and you've got to make the air sweeter, and you've got to put in bicycles and stuff. You've got to put the people love the idea of a village, but they don't want to live in a village. So you've got to put the village into the city.
So when they come to write the history of you as a mayor, are they going to say, what did he do? And on the list of top 10, are they going to say he brought bicycles to life in London?
I certainly hope that. I'm afraid they will say that. They will say that he flooded the streets with bicycles, and it's not, I must tell you, a universally popular thing to have done. I mean, I'm a passionate cyclist, and I love cycling, but we've got.
It's now true in Paris, and it's becoming true here.
It is, and I'm delighted to see it. I mean, one of the things you do incur a lot of hostility from motoring groups, and the other thing you discover as a mayor is that you can, no matter how passionate you are about cycling, you can never do enough for the cycling lobbies. I mean, they are insatiable.
In other words, all that you have done, they think you're only halfway there.
Yeah, they're never grateful for anything. And I think.
But you cycle around London, do you?
I cycle around.
You don't have a big Bentley that takes you from city to place to place?
I don't. No, it was wonderful to. I once had the honour of catching a ride with Mayor Mike Bloomberg,
Yes.
and as maybe you have, and the convoy of outriders, and I think
Suburbans here, Suburbans there.
I think they went the wrong way down Fifth Avenue or something like that. It was quite.
Well, I hope they didn't do that. Why do you love the job? I mean, you just sat down with me and you said it is a great job.
I began as I did all sorts of things in my career, but I love writing, and I began as a journalist. You mentioned the Spectator, but after a while, you really do pine when you reach your middle years. You pine to do things, and you're fed up with criticizing. And so I love what I love about being mayor. Yeah. There is no job like it in politics that gives you the ability to do stuff and do it fast.
And it's the closest thing between the governed and the governed.
Yeah, the element of direct democracy is very strong. I have a mandate of more than 1 million votes, which is nobody else has that in the UK. I have every day, I have a kind of rolling focus group with people who shout at me, you Tory tosser or whatever, on my bike, and then who want something done, and so that I engage with people in that way, and then I can do things. We've invented a new bus. We've delivered, designed, produced a wonderful new machine, and so on and so on and so on.
Did your journalistic skills help you as a politician?
Absolutely. I think journalism, for me, has just been a continuation of politics by other means, and clearly...
Or politics was a continuation of journalism by other means?
Well, I mean, there's obviously a natural cross-fertilization, and of course, the two things prop each other up. But, yes, people say nowadays that the oratory has gone out of politics. I don't think that is true. I think it's still very, very important.
So here's what they say about you. You have your eye on 10 Downing. That's where you want to go.
No. I've got a great job now, and as I say, I think it is the best job, certainly for me, in British politics. It's an incredible privilege to have been elected again.
So
I've got a lot to do. And you might equally say, Charlie, that as an American citizen, having been born in New York General Hospital, possessing, as I do, an American passport, I might equally have my eye on the White House, I mean, and let's...
No. Have you thought about it?
Have I thought about
Prime
returning?
Minister, yes. Well, and in other words, have you looked at David Cameron and said in yourself, when you looked in the mirror and say, I could be David Cameron. I could be that person.
Look, I think David Cameron is doing a fantastic job. And
so you're in favor of austerity and everything that he and... I think he and George Osborne are doing.
I think, look...
Because they say George Osborne is not so keen about the idea of you getting too much credit, because he wants to be the person that succeeds David Cameron?
Well, you know, these are, you know,
Well,
I think it's very important for politics that people should feel that the top job is coveted, and it's very important for a democracy that people should feel that. You know, we're all like wasps in a jam jar trying to survive.
Compete for it, because only by the competition for it can you get the best ideas.
Can you, and will the country be best served? Because it's only if you do have a ruthless process of mutual elimination by lots of, you know, talented and ambitious people, that in the end the country will, and which is an argument, which is an argument I make in
this book, Johnson's Life of London. People have made the city. I just want one last question about this. Can you tell me whether you intend at any point to make a run for Prime Minister?
As I say, I think that is vanishingly improbable.
So improbable is your answer. Not impossible, but improbable.
Yeah, I can. In the immortal phrase of Michael Heseltine, which is not possibly
who didn't quite make it, but he made it as Minister of Defence.
He did. I cannot foresee the circumstances in which I would be, in which I would do such a thing.
All right,
I've got a full-time job.
This is now videotape, as you know.
I've got 4 years, and we got a lot to do.
Including the Olympics.
Sure.
Tell me about the coming of the Olympics to London.
It's going to be a great thing for the city. It's the third time, and London's the only city in the world to have had 3 Olympic Games. Obviously, we're pleased. We beat New York, by the way, for that. Even though times have been tough, we think that the investments we're making will pay off.
Because people are raising the question of whether, you know, it's like there was a budget and then there was another budget, and then you're basically saying, at long last, we're going to come under one of these budgets.
We're going to come under one of these budgets. We sure are. We're going to be about $500 million under the budget. And
the third budget, I think that was.
With my budget. Don't forget, when I came in, the budget was set. We've come in half a billion under the budget, as it was when I came in. And, you know, touch wood, it's going to be a great Games. And I look forward to welcoming people from New York and from America.
Well, we hope to be there, because it is always a giant celebration of achievement, is what it is. Celebration of the universality of sports.
But that is right. And also, of course, of competition.
In your city, there is an investigation into hacking.
Yeah.
What is it going to do to journalism? What is it going to do to conduct?
I think the media, for a long time, was one of the great unregulated professions. This is the reality. And I think all newspapers and all newspaper groups, to a greater or lesser degree, were involved in unscrupulous practices of one kind or another. I think
unscrupulous and illegal?
And certainly illegal in the case of hacking people's phones. And I think the behavior was disgraceful. And it's right that it should be investigated to the crack of doom.
Okay, but the question is, yes, all of that's true.
Well, that's true. But, if you ask, will it change the media?
Yes.
Well,
conduct is what it will change. Will it change conduct?
It already has changed conduct, and it will continue to change. I don't believe that, in the sense that everybody's at the moment in London, very apprehensive about Leveson, and so the media is kind of...
Lord Leveson, it's the inquiry.
The inquiry that you've described.
I mean, journalism was your first love.
Yes, and I think, look, I think some of the stuff that went on in those papers was reprehensible. It was right that it was exposed. Insofar as people are guilty of illegal acts, they've got to go to jail. And all the rest of it. But the thing I was going to say, once this whole thing is finished, for heaven's sake, let's move on.
Has this diminished the political power in London of Rupert Murdoch?
You know...
You're not editing yourself, are you?
No, I think the reality is that, you know, the Times and the Sun and the Sunday Times and those titles remain incredibly important for
but it was said that politicians, half the members of Parliament that you knew, were intimidated.
Yeah, but you know they're intimidated by the BBC. The media is an intimidating beast.
Well,
if you get the media, if you're picking you up by the roots of your hair and dandling before you dandling
lives were destroyed and changed, and
that's what happens with the press. Yeah. So the point I'm making is that I think it's much too early to say that the power of News Corp, of News International, or whatever, has been significantly reduced or diminished in British politics, because those titles are still there.
Well,
they still
I'll ask a
count.
different
They
question.
matter.
Should it be diminished?
Look, I'd probably the last remaining politician. I think actually that when you look at what Rupert Murdoch did in the UK and the state of newspapers in the 1970s and 1980s, that grim era that I talked about earlier in the life of the city, I think he did a lot of good, and this is something for which I'm widely excoriated. But I think actually it was a revolution was needed, a technological revolution was needed. He financed it. As far as I can remember, in order to get the whole Sky TV, to get satellite TV into British households, I mean, the thing almost went bust, and he mortgaged his own house to do it. I mean, the guys. Look,
so
I'm a believer.
So the Mayor of London says Rupert Murdoch, rather than being castigated, should be hailed as a hero of journalism.
It's a complicated thing. There are many aspects to this problem. I certainly think that it's not a one-sided story, and I think he did a lot of good. He did a lot of good stuff, and it's obviously deeply disgraceful and regrettable that some of his publications have, his reputation has certainly, the reputation of those titles has been badly damaged.
Who are your heroes? Are they in this book?
Some of them are, yeah. Some of them certainly are, yeah. I would say Wilkes is a bit of a hero. I mean, Wilkes is a very controversial guy, but he's a hero of mine.
Are there more men and women of letters, than there are men and women of politics?
It's interesting how many of them are writers. Yes,
yeah, indeed. That's why I'm thinking this. And Shakespeare's driving the bus.
That's Shakespeare's driving the bus. But
and Churchill's at the back here.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. But I think it is by the words of a civilization that it is remembered. I think above all, it's by literature is the thing that is the greatest legacy. Samuel Johnson, what a great guy. I don't think I genuinely think there is a danger that people will forget about the achievements of some of these people, and I wanted to celebrate them.
If you do what I do, you're pleased to see people like you in politics. So, thank you for coming to this table.
Well, thank you for having me.
The Mayor of London, Boris Johnson. The book is called Johnson's Life of London: The People Who Made the City That Made the World. Back in a moment. Stay with us.